Okay, this is Ian Monroe at Haunch-of-Venison in Berlin. His second exhibition, first solo exhibition in Berlin, called The Instantaneous Everything. And we are standing here behind of us as a piece of Ian Monroe, which reminded me of constructive art. So do you refer to constructive art and maybe of some artists?
Oh yeah. I like to pull in lots of references in constructive art, and some of the suprematists were really influential. And basically, the period of the early 20th century, there was a lot going on. There was science, architecture, design, new ideas of urbanism, and new ideas of the built environment, and also an optimism. But at the same time, there were a lot of dark things happening. So it was an era that I think is still quite fertile. And also, I grew up kind of with the objects and the design ethos that came out of that. So my parents were born in the late 30s, so they owned the modernism that I sort of stubbed my toes on in the house. So the Mies van der Rohe glass table, I kept hitting my shins on. So I have a kind of connection with that on a personal historical background, but also artistically and in the way I see my artwork kind of addressing issues that are still around today.
So you would say you love the Bauhaus?
Yeah, I grew up in a Bauhaus. The community I actually was raised in Virginia was a planned architectural community in the U.S. outside of Washington, D.C. And I think that underlying, it was meant to be very utopian. You could walk everywhere. Trees and mixed economies of housing were all kind of, green spaces were very much a part of it. And so for me, there's always been a kind of deep interest in how the built environment can affect and create change around you, and how it also describes or prescribes things that you experience. So
when you talk about your art, you say words like unifying idea. Is that a political statement as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm quite interested. It's political on a larger scale in terms of not a, not a party politic, but a politic of a sort of a general guiding principle behind how we organize structure, society, infrastructure, systems, and how those affect us. So in my case, if there's a politic, it's a sort of ambivalence about these structures of order. Apropos right now with the banking system, which we're not in control of anymore, even though we created it. That tends to be why the work has a kind of, emptiness or almost post-human quality. So there's a kind of, buried underneath these ideas of unification is also a darkness in which you can get displaced by the very unity that you've tried to create. So that's a political...
So this black image behind of us has been painted in the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, not this one. Which one? That one actually, but yeah. The black images have come out lately because this is a reference formally to a chalkboard. And this piece is about a German astronomer named Johannes Kepler, right, from the early 1600s. Well, he sort of did his most important work in the
when
early
the Earth wasn't already
a center.
A center, yes.
Yeah. And he believed that geometry, the five Platonic solids, unified the universe. So he believed that basically the isohedron, the dodecahedron, the cube were the things that the planets were hung on. And he had this idea basically that the universe could be unified through geometry. And he spent years trying to prove this, and he finally got a hold of the numbers, the observational data from a man named Tycho Brahe, a Danish astronomer. And he had all of his hopes dashed. He'd worked for years to get these numbers, and when he finally got them, the whole thing had to be thrown out. But for 5 or 6 years, he wrote Harmonious Mundi, the harmonious world. Wrote a whole book. He spaced his whole career on it. But I like the idea that for a moment there, he thought he had the answer to everything. But it evaporates, like a chalkboard in front of you. It's shapes.
But that the people don't think Ian Monroe is just painting black pictures. Ian Monroe is doing a lot of very colorful things as well, which you can see underneath on the first floor. Yeah. So Color
Yeah.
is important as well.
Color is very important. I think the material I use, and specifically the colors, are very, well, it's all vinyl. So it tends to be very plastic and very saturated. It is almost like chemical rather than having a smeared or kind of watery quality. It's super saturated and it's crisp. It ends, one color ends, the next begins. And so it's very modern in that sense. It's a manufactured edge rather than a painted or a smeared edge, which I like to use to reflect the sort of the world we're in now, which is a very hard line edge. There's a lot of no room. The boundaries are getting less and less gray, actually. And fluorescent colors, for example, are great because they're ultra modern. They're only man-made. You know, they're now. You see a fluorescent color and you know it's probably post-70s, maybe 80s, really.
So maybe you could change the world with more colorful pieces.
Maybe, yeah. Actually, the last show was all reds and greens and turquoises. So this black thing is kind of a new. I think for me it was just. I mean, you can get such a range within black, and also black is great because it remains a non-color. So you kind of reduce it down to a schematic. It becomes more like a plan, and it's the minimum necessary. And in fact, cameras don't pick up a lot of it. It needs the human eye, really. So it's kind of a funny. I can get away with a lot of subtlety with blacks and beautiful. It can be really beautiful, but I'm drawn to desolate things. So black for me is quite, you know.
The end of that is Robert Ryman,
Yes.
where you have just the black. Just the black.
Yeah, well, there's a long history. I mean, I wanted to sort of address that history of modernism and painting and the black square and play around with that and kind of, you know, open it up and talk about that history again, because I think in a lot of the world, that modernity is still being sought after and still developing. Whereas in the West, we tend to think it's over. But there's lots of places in the world that's still a byword for now, and still a cultural kind of, you know, what do you want to say, aspiration, I guess. So historically, yeah, blacks and whites.
Blacks and whites.
Yeah.
So Ian Monroe's exhibition here takes place during the Art Forum Berlin. Ian Monroe, what is next after this exhibition here at Haunch-of-Venison in Berlin?
Back to London. I have a few group shows coming up. And actually, I'm going back to the studio because normally I have a few assistants, but I'm going to have them. I'm going to go back to the studio on my own for a while and start a whole new series of work. So.
And studio is in London?
In London, yeah. And I find it necessary every couple of years to change the way I do things to some degree and freshen it back up. So we have there's a few museum things on the go, which we're still trying to confirm. But basically, yeah, I'm looking forward to a whole new series of work over the next year.
So thank you very much, Ian Monroe, for this interview, and good luck for your future. Thanks.
Yeah, cheers. Good night. Thanks.